On a quiet Monday morning in Grafton, a town so uneventful even the word quiet felt unnecessary, Officer Marvin Hedges was halfway into his third cup of coffee when the station door creaked open. A man walked in, mid-50s, white shirt, gray sweater, shoes with just enough wear to show they were loved, not neglected. He had that scent, paper, rain, and something else you only catch from people who live alone. Not body odor, but the absence of touch. "Good morning," the man said, voice calm, like he was here to renew a license. "I'd like to file a missing person report." Marvin straightened. Missing people didn't happen often in Grafton. Not the kind that got reported, anyway. "Okay, sure. Who's gone missing?" The man looked at him squarely. "I have." There was a beat of silence, then another. Marvin blinked. "I'm sorry, did you say you're the one who's missing?" "Yes," he nodded, like it made perfect sense. "I believe I've been missing for quite some time. I'm just now ready to make it official." It was the kind of thing that would have made a better joke if the man didn't look so serious. Not panicked, not confused, just certain. Marvin set the form down and leaned forward. "You're saying you are the person who's missing?" "Yes. My name is Leonard Grady. I'm 57. I live alone on East Pine Street, and I believe I no longer exist in the way people think I do." "You're sitting right here, sir." "I am," Leonard agreed, "but I'm not present." He hesitated. He'd been on the force for 23 years. He'd seen prank calls, false alarms, even a guy who claimed he was abducted by cows. But this wasn't silly. It wasn't a cry for help either. It was something stranger. A man reporting himself missing with complete composure. "Mind if I ask why now?" Marvin said carefully. Leonard looked up, thinking. "Because yesterday I heard a child laugh, and it did nothing. No rise in the chest, no smile, just air. I used to feel something when I heard that sound. Now it's like music in a language I don't speak anymore." Marvin exhaled slowly. He glanced around the station. It was quiet. No phones ringing, no radio chatter, just him and this man who seemed to have misplaced something essential. He reached for a clipboard anyway. "Let's fill out the report." Leonard smiled faintly, like someone finally taking their coat off after being cold too long. They went through the motions. Full name, Leonard Joseph Grady. Date of birth, July 2nd, 1967. Address, 217 East Pine Street. Occupation, reference librarian at Grafton Public Library. Height, 5'11". Weight, 168 pounds. Last seen by others, daily. I go to work, I nod to neighbors. Last seen by self, that's the part I can't remember. Marvin paused. "Excuse me?" Leonard leaned forward slightly. "There was a time I could look at myself in the mirror and say, 'Yep, that's me.' I haven't felt that in years. Now it's just a face I manage." Marvin circled something on the form he wouldn't admit he didn't understand. "Are you under psychiatric care, Mr. Grady?" "No." "Any history of dissociative disorders, memory loss?" "No. And if I did, I wouldn't be filing this report." Marvin frowned. "Why not?" "Because then it would be a condition," Leonard said gently. "This isn't that. This is subtraction. One piece at a time. And I've reached 0. There was something deeply unsettling about how calm Leonard was. His voice didn't shake. His hands were steady. There was no desperation in his eyes. Only clarity. "I've gone to work every day. paid my bills, recycled, answered texts, but none of those things are me. They're reflex, routine, shadow puppets. Marvin scribbled something down. So, what do you want me to do with this report, sir? File it. Mark me missing. Start the protocol. There is no protocol for this. Leonard nodded again. I figured. They sat in silence for a moment. Leonard folded his hands on the desk. But I think it's important to acknowledge the loss. What loss? Myself. Later, Marvin stood in the break room staring at the bulletin board, the missing cat flyers, the weekly schedule, a faded poster about stress management. Nothing for this. He thought about Leonard's eyes, how they didn't ask for help, how they didn't seem lost, but resigned, like a man who'd finally admitted he was living in the wrong skin. He pulled out the report again. There was something written in Leonard's handwriting on the back. If found, please don't return me. Just let me be. Marvin folded the page and slid it into a drawer labeled Unfiled. Then he locked it. That night, brushing his teeth, Marvin caught himself staring into the mirror longer than usual. He blinked, furrowed his brow, tilted his head, and then asked, not out loud, but loud enough to hear in his bones, what if I'm not here either? Leonard Grady lived in a house that smelled like old paper, coffee that had cooled long ago, and the faint scent of linen spray no one else ever noticed. He liked things clean, but not pristine. His bookshelf was alphabetized, not by author or genre, but by how often he reached for each book. More often on the top shelf, almost never on the bottom. He had a favorite mug, but he didn't drink from it. It just sat there, on a high kitchen shelf, untouched, but perfectly visible. Some things weren't for use. Some things were just anchors. His neighbors thought of him as a polite man, the type who never forgets to return a rake, always waves from the porch, always says, no problem, even when there probably was one. At the library, he showed up on time, shelved quietly, maintained the microfiche reader, never lost a single record in 17 years. They gave him a reliability award once. He didn't hang it up, just placed it in the back of his sock drawer behind 2 sets of winter gloves. People assumed he was content. The truth was, he hadn't felt anything close to contentment since 2013, though he couldn't explain what changed that year. There were no major traumas, no deaths, no ruptures in his life. But slowly, day by day, he started noticing that the things that used to echo inside him, the smell of rain, a song on the radio, a stranger's smile, now barely made a sound. He didn't lose interest in life. He just stopped feeling included in it. It started small. A coworker told a joke in the break room. Everyone laughed. Leonard mimicked the laughter. Later, he couldn't recall what the joke was, only that he had to laugh because the others did. That's what people did. He waved at Mrs. Culliver across the street every morning. Once, he decided not to wave. She didn't wave either. The next day, she waved again, and so did he. But it stuck with him, that moment of nothing, how easily he had disappeared from her morning. One night, he sat on his couch and wrote a list. I sleep 8 hours. I eat 3 meals. I go to work. I answer emails. I smile when expected. I say thank you when receiving change. I recycle glass and plastics separately. I attend every annual checkup. At the bottom, he wrote, "But what part of that is me?" He stared at the question for a long time and crumpled the paper and threw it away. The next morning, he fished it out of the trash and ironed it flat with the bottom of his coffee mug. He folded it into a small square and tucked it behind the picture frame of his father, a man who had also lived predictably and died quietly. He kept a journal, not of thoughts, but of existence. Every night, one line, "Still here." Sometimes he added a second line, "Still not sure why." His house was filled with things that looked like a life. A hat he never wore, a plant he watered but didn't name, framed photographs from a vacation he didn't remember enjoying. He had Spotify playlists titled "Hopeful Rainy Morning," "Chores but with Emotion," and "Maybe I'm Not Empty." But the songs eventually felt like cardboard, same notes, no weight. One night he asked himself aloud, what would happen if I just stopped? He didn't mean suicide. He meant maintenance, the gestures, the autopilot. What would happen if he didn't respond to "How are you?" What if he didn't smile when someone passed him in the hallway? But he couldn't bring himself to try. Even detachment had a script, and he was good at playing his part. There was a calendar on his fridge. In the upper corner of the month of May, he'd written in red ink, "Try living differently today." That square had come and gone 37 times over the years. The note remained in every new calendar. He never crossed it off. At the library, a girl named Maura once asked him, "Mr. Grady, what's your favorite book?" He opened his mouth and realized he didn't have an answer. He had a default answer, "The Wind in the Willows." He'd said it dozens of times, because it was charming, safe, but he hadn't read it in years. That night, he took the book home and read it again. It felt like reading someone else's favorite memory. He began noticing odd moments, small slips in time. He'd be shelving a book, then realize he had no memory of retrieving it. Or he'd find himself staring at a clock, unable to tell how long he'd been staring. He was functioning, but it felt like someone had turned the volume down on the world. He started carrying a notebook, each page dated, each page contained one question. Some were simple. What did I do today? Others were like broken whispers. When did I last recognize my voice? Is Leonard a name or a story? If no one said my name for a week, would I still exist? Still, from the outside, everything looked fine. The mailman waved, Leonard waved back. The girl at the coffee shop asked, "Same order?" And he said, "Yes." He paid his taxes. He renewed his license. He even voted in the local election, though he couldn't remember which candidate he picked. He was present in every way but being. And then, one evening, in mid-autumn, he woke up on the couch at 3:47 a.m., the TV humming low static, a cup of tea still warm beside him, and he felt it, that something had left. Not all at once, not like a dramatic soul escape, but like breath from a tire, quiet, steady, gone before you knew it. He said it out loud for no one to hear. "I think I've gone missing." The next morning, he stood in front of the bathroom mirror and tried to smile. The face smiled back. It looked real. The teeth showed, the cheeks lifted, but it felt like pushing a shopping cart with a broken wheel, forward, but not quite right. He took the day off work, walked to the police station, and filed the report. Leonard remembered the exact moment he realized something inside him had shut off. It was early spring, 3 years ago. A coworker had brought in her newborn, pink-cheeked, sleepy, wrapped in an impossibly soft blanket. Everyone in the library staff room had gathered around, making those high, gentle cooing noises reserved for babies and puppies. Leonard stood behind them, coffee in hand, smiling. He said all the right things. "She's beautiful. She looks just like you. There's nothing like that newborn smell, is there?" He even leaned in and gently touched the baby's tiny sock-covered foot. But inside, nothing. No warmth, no awe, no stir of tenderness. Just the mild recognition of a moment that was supposed to be meaningful. Later that day, he sat at his desk, stared at the blinking cursor on his computer screen, and wrote in his notebook, "I think I've gone numb. Not sad, not angry, just off." He once stood in front of a painting in a local gallery for nearly an hour. People passed him, the lights changed, but he didn't move. The painting wasn't special. A field of blue, a single tree, maybe a bird in the upper corner. It was the kind of thing that once would have made him pause, take a breath, feel something. But not that day. He could tell the painting was good, technically, but it didn't reach him. It felt like looking at art through glass so thick it muted all the color. When a woman standing beside him whispered, "Beautiful, isn't it?" he nodded but didn't answer, because he didn't feel beautiful, or moved, or anything. He used to cry during movies, not weep, but tear up quietly when something struck a chord. The death of a father, a son's last words, a dog waiting for its owner. Now, nothing. He rewatched The Iron Giant, a movie that once wrecked him. He remembered crying years ago when the giant said, "You stay, I go, no following." This time, he mouthed the line with the same timing, but his chest didn't tighten, his eyes didn't sting. He just blinked and reached for popcorn he didn't even taste. He began testing himself. He watched videos of soldiers returning home, of children hearing for the first time, of elderly couples dancing in kitchens. Still nothing. He read sad stories, hopeful stories, stories meant to make you ache, and he understood what he should be feeling, but it never arrived. He once pulled up a recording of his mother's voicemail, the one she'd left him years ago, just before she passed. Her voice was soft, laughing. "Leonard, you're probably organizing your books again. Call me back when you remember I exist." He used to play that voicemail once a year around her birthday. It would break him open for a few hours. Now, he listened to it 3 times in a row. Still dry. He stopped listening to music with lyrics. They made him feel like a liar. Instead, he played ambient noise, rain on windows, crackling fireplaces, library hums, the sounds of places where nothing was expected of him. He deleted his playlists one by one. He never changed his phone wallpaper again. He let the library's computer autofill his login each time because typing Leonard G felt foreign, like pretending to be someone he hadn't met. He found a photo of himself at 22, taken by a college friend on a rooftop in New Haven, back when Leonard believed he would become a novelist. He stared at that photo and tried to remember what that younger man felt like. The open hunger for life, the righteous anger, the sharp, spontaneous laughter. That Leonard would have hated this version, the careful man with no arguments left, the man who hadn't written a word of fiction in over a decade, the man who once said, "Maybe next year," and forgot to mean it. He had a plant named Victor, a snake plant. It used to live on the windowsill in his bedroom. He moved it to the hallway 6 months ago and never moved it back. It turned yellow. He still watered it, on time, every Sunday, but Victor wasn't thriving. He made a note. Is Victor like me, functioning but fading? Sometimes he stood in the middle of his living room with the lights off. Just stood there, 10, 15 minutes. He didn't cry, he didn't pace, he didn't think. He just existed, quietly, as if to be picked up by something that never came. He used to write poetry. Not good poetry, but honest. Now, even the urge had vanished. His last poem read, "I used to feel a wind. Now I'm just a window." I didn't know if it was a metaphor or an accident. The worst part wasn't the numbness. It was how logical everything still seemed. His bank account was healthy, his blood pressure fine. He flossed, he voted, he responded to every birthday text with a "thanks" smiley face. No one suspected anything was off. No one asked deeper questions. And if they had, Leonard might not have known how to answer. Because how do you say, "I am not here anymore," when you're making eye contact and holding a cup of coffee? In therapy, years ago, his counselor had once asked him to describe how joy felt in his body. He said, "It's like pressing a piano key and the note just keeps going, even after you lift your finger." She asked, "And now?" He said, "It's like trying to press the key and realizing it was never connected to strings at all." He once heard someone say, "Emotions are how your soul proves you're alive," and he laughed, genuinely. But these days, he wondered if his emotions had gone dark. Had the rest followed? He remembered touching the baby's foot in the library. How small it was, how soft. He remembered thinking, if I feel nothing from this, what else can I lose? And then came the night he called his own voicemail. Just to hear someone talk to him, even if it was himself. He said, "Hey, just checking in. Are you still there?" He never played it back. He didn't want to know how empty his own voice might sound. He tried saying his name in the mirror. Leonard. Then slower. Lee-O-Nard. He repeated it again and again until it lost shape, until it sounded like a mistake. He stood there, staring at his reflection, mouth moving, trying to locate the part where that sound belonged to the man looking back at him. Nothing clicked. It wasn't that he hated the name. It wasn't even that he wanted a new one. He just didn't fit into it anymore. It felt like trying on a sweater from 20 years ago, the one that technically still went over your head and arms, but didn't stretch the right way, didn't sit right on the shoulders, didn't belong to the body anymore. He found an old yearbook from high school, page 73. Grady, Leonard, chess club, debate team, most likely to publish a novel. He looked at the photo, a boy with too much hair and too much certainty, and felt like he was spying on a stranger. That kid had a future, a name that held promise, a mind that burned bright. Leonard touched the page lightly, then closed the book. He didn't hate that boy, but he couldn't remember becoming him. At the DMV, they called his name twice before he stood up. "Leonard Grady?" He blinked, startled. Yes, that's me." But it hadn't sounded like his name. It felt like someone else's, a neighbor or a character in a movie. He repeated it under his breath while he waited in line. "Leonard Grady, Leonard Grady, Leonard Grady." By the fifth repetition, the words felt artificial, manufactured. He wondered if this happened to other people, if anyone else ever had their own name slip through their fingers like a dropped coin. When he signed documents, he stared at his signature. The L looped too perfectly. The G was tight, almost mechanical. It looked like someone trying too hard to prove something, someone still pretending they had a name worth signing. He began writing it differently at home, in lowercase, sloppier. Once he signed L ? On a delivery receipt and handed it to the driver without looking down. The man didn't even blink. He reread emails he'd sent over the past year. They all started the same. "Hey, it's Leonard. Hope all is well." But none of them felt personal. They were like customer service templates, automated warmth. He wondered how many people replied simply out of politeness. How many saw his name in their inbox and thought, he's still around? He wasn't angry about it. He just found it fascinating how a name could keep appearing in the world while the person behind it quietly vanished. He sat at the kitchen table one night, pulled out his birth certificate, his passport, his social security card. They all agreed. He was Leonard Joseph Grady, born July 2, 1967, to Henry and Madeline Grady in Putnam County. But those words felt like someone describing a person they once knew. It was all true, and still, it meant nothing. He wasn't denying it. He was just disconnected, like reading a well-written bio for an actor you couldn't picture. He Googled himself. 3 hits. One was a mention in the library newsletter. Another was a city council attendance log. The third was an obituary for another Leonard Grady who died in Texas in 2009. He clicked on that one. He read it slowly, line by line, imagining if it were about him. Beloved husband, devoted father, war veteran, avid fisherman. He didn't even like fishing. Still, he felt oddly jealous of that other Leonard Grady, because that man had a narrative, a clear, finished arc. He, on the other hand, felt like an unfinished draft someone forgot to save. He tried a memory exercise. He wrote the names of everyone he'd ever loved. 3 names came easily. 2 he had to look up. 1 he left blank because he couldn't remember her last name. It wasn't that they hadn't mattered. It was that he had not mattered during those times, or at least not to himself. He'd been a companion, a conversationalist, a man with manners, but not a presence. Not the kind people write about, not the kind people remember. He dreamed once that he was in a crowded train station. Everyone had suitcases, everyone was moving fast. He stood there with nothing in his hands, trying to remember where he was going. An announcement blared over the loudspeaker. "Leonard Grady, please report to Lost and Found." He looked around, panicked, and saw a child tugging on a woman's sleeve. "Mom, isn't that the man from the mirror?" When he woke, his pillow was wet with sweat. He sat on the edge of the bed for a full hour, trying to figure out whether it had been a dream or a memory. He never found an answer. Once, he stood in the grocery store, staring at a row of name keychains. Madison, Tyler, Chloe, Daniel. No Leonard. He checked the rack 3 times. The teenage clerk asked, "Are you looking for something?" "No," he replied. "I think I'm just verifying." There was one moment, just one, when he considered choosing a new name. He made a list. Names that sounded free. Theo, Jules, Marlowe. Names that sounded quiet. Ellis, Reeve, Callan. But every name felt like putting on someone else's coat, a different discomfort, not a solution. He wasn't searching for a replacement. He was searching for the original, the version of Leonard that meant something. He started whispering things at night, not prayers, not mantras, just questions. "Are you still there? Can you hear me? What color are my thoughts? Is Leonard still inside?" Then one night, walking home past the bakery on 1st Street, he saw a boy crying on the curb, maybe 9 years old, scraped knee, no parents in sight. Leonard kneeled beside him, offered his sleeve to wipe the tears. The boy looked up, confused. "Who are you?" Leonard opened his mouth. No answer came. And for the first time in his life, the silence felt honest. The postcard arrived on a Thursday. It was raining. Leonard hadn't checked the mailbox in 4 days. Bills, mostly, coupons, the usual noise of modern life trying to be noticed. But this one stuck out. It was handwritten, no return address. A vintage photograph of a lake on one side, mist curling over still water, an empty canoe drifting near shore. The message on the back said, "You're not where you were, but you're not gone. Try the place with the orange door. -L." Just that. No date, no explanation. He turned the card over and over again, studying the image. The photo wasn't familiar, not a place he'd visited, not one he could name, but it gave him a feeling. The kind of ache you get from a dream that vanishes the moment you try to describe it. He ran his thumb over the ink. It had smudged slightly in the rain, but the words remained legible. Try the place with the orange door. He set it on the kitchen counter beside the coffee machine, stared at it for a long time, thought about throwing it out, thought about framing it. In the end, he slipped it into his pocket and left the house without saying why. He didn't have a plan, just started walking, past the dry cleaners where no one smiled, past the old florist that always smelled faintly of lemon and dust, past the corner cafe where they knew his name, but not his favorite song. He turned down streets he hadn't taken in years, looked at houses, at doors. Blue, gray, white, black, red, brown. No orange. He passed a small barber shop. A man inside waved. Leonard waved back, though he didn't recognize him. Then, 3 blocks later, he stopped. There it was, a faded orange door tucked between a bakery and an insurance agency. The paint was chipped, the frame slightly tilted. No sign, just that door. He didn't remember this place. He'd walked this street before, hadn't he? Maybe not. He reached for the handle. It wasn't locked. The door opened with a soft groan, and he stepped inside. It was a bookstore, or something like one. Books lined the walls, no categories, no prices. Just shelves, slightly crooked, crammed with worn titles. A record played in the background, something old and slow. The air smelled like cedar and thyme. No one greeted him. He walked in further, cautious. Then he saw it, a small table near the back with a handwritten sign, "Forgotten books, yours or someone else's." On the table was a single volume, no title on the spine, no cover art, just a brown leather-bound journal. He picked it up. On the first page, in neat handwriting, it read, "Entries recovered from L. Grady, compiled between 2010 and 2014. His hands froze. He flipped to the next page. April 3rd, 2010, 2:14 a.m. I forgot my mother's voice today. I tried to remember the way she said my name. Couldn't do it. But I remember the color of her raincoat. Green, with a missing button. May 19th, 2011, 7:06 a.m. A woman asked me what I wanted from life. I said peace, but I meant recognition. She said I looked like someone who used to be interesting. August 27th, 2012, 11:39 p.m. I wrote a poem and deleted it. That's the 5th one this month. I'm scared I'm not being silent because I'm disciplined. I'm silent because I'm scared I no longer sound like me. Leonard sat down. He turned page after page, reading fragments, thoughts he had no memory of writing but recognized as his own. There were jokes, lists, sketches of hands, notes about dreams he'd never shared, sentences that stung in their accuracy. I am seen, but not located. My body is punctual, my soul is late. Some days I wear my name like a borrowed coat. He lost track of time in that room. At some point, he realized the light had changed. The record had ended. But he wasn't alone. A woman now stood behind the counter, not young, not old. She had eyes that looked like she'd read everyone who had ever walked through the door. "Did you find something?" she asked. Leonard held up the journal. She nodded. "Been waiting for you to remember it." He tried to speak, but the question caught in his throat. "How did it get here?" She shrugged gently. "Sometimes we leave parts of ourselves behind. Someone's got to keep them safe until we're ready to look." He looked down at the journal. It's mine? Only if you want it to be? He didn't remember walking home. The journal felt heavy in his coat pocket, like a forgotten tool rediscovered. He didn't open it again that night. Instead, he made tea, sat in the dark, closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he tried to picture something, anything. What came to mind wasn't a full image, but a feeling, a hand, reaching out. Not to hold, not to push away, just to say, I'm still here. The next morning, he made a list. Return to the orange door. Reread every entry. Add a new one. Say your name without apology. Stay curious, even if it hurts. At the bottom, he wrote in larger print, You may not be lost. You might just be somewhere you've never looked. It was small, but it was something. It began with a phone call. A simple request: transfer his medical records to a new clinic. Leonard had put it off for weeks, but something about holding that leather-bound journal, the one from the bookstore with the orange door, had stirred a thread of curiosity. He wanted to know who he had been, what had happened to him. The woman on the line was kind, efficient. Of course, Mr. Grady. What's the time range you'd like? He hesitated. Let's say everything since 2008. A few days later, a packet arrived, thick, stapled. His full medical history. Or so he thought. He sat at the kitchen table, spreading the pages out like puzzle pieces. Dental cleanings, eye exams, annual physicals, notes about low cholesterol, a sprained ankle in 2009, bronchitis in 2015. But between October 2009 and July 2014, there was nothing. No appointments, no prescriptions, no insurance activity, no lab results. 5 years. Empty. He checked the file again, then checked again. Called the clinic. There seems to be a gap, he said slowly. Between 2009 and 2014. Did I stop coming in? The woman paused. We only have records starting 2014, sir. Before that, nothing under your name or your birth date. He waited for the punchline, the simple clerical error, but she didn't offer one. He logged into his health insurance portal. Same result. Coverage from 2008 to 2009, then a complete lapse. No payments, no claims, nothing. Then it resumed, July 2014, when he apparently re-enrolled. He didn't remember doing that. He always paid on time, always tracked receipts. He prided himself on not being that guy, the one who forgot to renew. He checked his taxes. Filed 2008, filed 2009. No tax records from 2010 to 2013. Filed 2014. He scrolled, heart thudding. Could he have skipped filing? No, that wasn't him. He opened his calendar app. He went back month by month. Birthday reminders, dentist appointments, calls with friends, all steady. Until October 2009. Then blank. all the way through July 2014. He checked his email. There was a gap there too. Old threads vanished, contacts gone, out-of-office responses that made no sense. "I'll be offline for a while. See you when I'm back." No context, no explanation. And then in July 2014, an email to a former coworker. "Hey, sorry for the silence. I'm back now. Let's catch up soon." Back from where? Why had he never asked? He looked in his photo library. That part hurt the most. Thousands of photos before 2010 of meals, sunsets, friends' weddings, and thousands after 2014. But in between, a total of 3. One of a blurry sidewalk, one of his hand, one of an unreadable street sign at night. He stared at those 3 photos for a long time. They didn't even feel like they were taken by him. He called his bank. "Can you confirm my account activity for the years 2010 to 2014? "Yes, sir. Let me pull that up." He waited. "Sir, I'm only seeing account activity beginning July 2014. Before that, we don't have data under this account number." "What about older accounts, ones that might have closed?" "Nothing under your name or SSN, sir." He hung up, sat very still. He opened a blank document on his laptop. At the top, he wrote, "Where was I?" Underneath, he made a list. No medical records, no taxes filed, no photos, no calendar entries, no email threads, no bank accounts, no receipts, no social media posts, no journals, no books read, no books bought, no trace. At the bottom, he wrote, "I disappeared. I just never noticed." He picked up the journal from the orange door again, turned to the middle. There it was, a single entry, undated but slotted between 2009 and 2014. "I feel like I am being stored, not lived." He whispered it aloud. Stored, not lived. Like an object wrapped in cloth and hidden in a box. Preserved, but forgotten. The next day, he went to the library where he worked. He asked the archivist, a woman named June, if she had records of his employment during that time. She frowned. "You took a leave of absence, remember?" "I did? For a couple years. You said you were going to write a book. Said you needed time. You even left us a poem." Leonard blinked. "What poem?" She rummaged in a drawer and handed him a folded sheet of paper. Faded, typewritten. "Some men walk forward. Some men walk circles. I am walking to find a wall I have not built." He read it twice. Didn't remember writing it, but something in it hurt, like a pressure point behind the ribs. He began wondering, had anyone seen me, truly seen me between 2010 and 2014? He called 3 old friends. 1 picked up, 2 didn't. The one who answered, Josh, sounded surprised. "Leonard, man, it's been a while." "Yeah, I've been thinking about old times." They talked about college, about a road trip they never took. Then Leonard asked, "Do you remember me being around in, say, 2012? Did we talk?" There was a pause. "I mean, I thought you were overseas or something? You kind of vanished for a while, right?" "I did?" That's what I figured. We all assumed you were off the grid doing some eat, pray, write thing. Leonard laughed weakly. Did I tell you that? No, you just stopped showing up. Didn't reply much. Then one day you texted me like nothing had happened. Leonard said thank you. Hung up. Then sat down in silence. He began to feel it then, not just confusion, but grief. Not over something lost, but over something unlived. He hadn't just gone quiet. He had ceased, without protest, without notice. He checked himself in the mirror again. Same face, same voice, same name. But now a question burned behind his eyes. Who walked in my body when I was gone? That night he wrote in the back of the orange door journal, I think I am real. I think I have been real. But there is a stretch of time I do not own. What if part of me, some other self, borrowed those years and never returned them? He stared at the words, then added, what if he did something I cannot remember? Or worse, what if he remembered being me better than I do? Leonard fell asleep at his kitchen table that night, and in his dream, he was back in that bookstore with the orange door. But this time, someone else was sitting in the corner. A man with the same face, same eyes, same hands, but smiling. The man looked up and said, You left me there. You just forgot to come pick me up. Leonard had never visited room 304 at the Crestview Motel before, at least not that he remembered. But the key card was in his glove box, tucked in a weathered envelope. No note, no logo, just a worn plastic card with faded numbers. He found it while looking for an old pair of sunglasses. At first, he assumed it was trash. Then curiosity crept in like a fog. Crestview Motel, just off the highway, half an hour away. He went. The man at the front desk didn't recognize him. Checking in? Leonard hesitated. I think I've stayed here before. The clerk typed something, shrugged. No record under your name, but room 304's been out of rotation for years. Renovation backlog. Leonard held up the card. The clerk frowned. Well, damn, that's one of the old ones, from before we digitize. Mind if I take a look? The man stared at him a second too long, then nodded. Sure, it's unlocked, but don't tell corporate. The hallway smelled like time. Room 304 was near the end, past peeling wallpaper and forgotten vending machines. Leonard paused outside the door, heart skipping uneven beats. He slid the card. The light blinked green. The door opened. It was clean, but frozen in time. Old carpet, faded bedspread, lamps that hummed when turned on, the scent of dust and detergent that no longer quite won the battle. On the dresser, a notepad. Crestview Motel. How was your stay? On the pad, words, faintly pressed. He tilted it under the light. If you don't remember being here, it doesn't mean you weren't. L. His breath caught. He opened the closet. Inside, a denim jacket, a paperback novel, a receipt from a diner 2 towns over. The receipt was dated June 12, 2012. Leonard picked up the jacket, checked the pockets. A photograph of him, leaning against the motel door, smiling. But something was off. He was wearing glasses he never owned, a haircut he never liked, and the signature at the bottom corner. Cal. Cal? He brought the photo to the front desk. "You ever seen this guy?" The clerk squinted. "Looks like a guy who used to come here, yeah. Quiet, tipped well, always paid cash. Think he went by Cal or Al or something." Leonard blinked. "You're sure?" The man nodded. "Pretty sure. Stayed for long stretches, kept to himself." "Did he ever leave anything behind?" "Maybe. We got a lost and found and back. Want me to check?" Leonard nodded. A few minutes later, the man returned, held up a small box. Inside, a moleskin notebook, a lighter, a used bus ticket to Flagstaff, a folded napkin with the name Eleanor, and a phone number. He opened the notebook. No name inside, just one page used. Cal, day 41. Feeling clear today. The old name doesn't tug like it used to. Still don't dream, but I hum now. That's new. Back home, Leonard sat in silence. He set the photo on the table, the receipt, the notebook. He Googled the number. It was disconnected, but the area code matched somewhere he'd never been, at least not that he could recall. He lay down, closed his eyes, and tried saying it out loud. Cal. It didn't feel wrong. That scared him more than anything. Over the next week, he searched public records. No trace of anyone named Cal matching his face. No license, no bills, no lease. But there were hints, mentions on forum posts. A user named Cal Rides West commenting on vintage motorcycle threads in 2011. A short story published in an online zine, author listed as CG. The story was about a man who erased his past to see if he could survive without memories. He read it 3 times. By the 3rd read, he cried. Not because it was sad, but because he remembered the rhythm. It sounded like him, like his writing, his voice, but not the one people knew. He started thinking about why someone might vanish. Not from fear, but from intention. What if he had chosen to become Cal? What if he had grown so tired of being Leonard that he invented someone else, not as disguise, but as freedom? He made a list. Why would I leave myself behind? To escape history, to reset, to prove identity is fluid, to unlearn something, to be unobserved, to forgive myself by becoming someone else. He dreamed again. Same train station. But this time he wasn't waiting. He was walking, suitcase in hand. A woman passed him and whispered, "You look like someone I used to know." He replied, "Maybe I still am." He called June from the library again. "Did I ever write under another name back when I was gone?" She was quiet. Then, "You told me once you liked the name Cal because it sounded like it could vanish into a crowd." "Did I say why?" "No, just said it was lighter." He picked up the journal one last time, added an entry. "I was Leonard, I was Cal. Maybe I was both, and neither, and something in between. Maybe identity is just the shape we hold when the light hits us. And I changed shape for a while, not because I was lost, but because I was searching. And maybe, just maybe, he had found enough of himself again to start living forward. Not as Leonard, not as Cal, but as someone who remembered being both. The day Leonard vanished, for the second time, was cloudy but warm. No one noticed it at first. His neighbor saw him early that morning, walking toward the post office in a faded green jacket, holding something flat under one arm. He nodded. Leonard nodded back. The barista at the cafe said he came in at 9:07 a.m., ordered a black coffee and a lemon scone, paid in cash, and left a tip. She remembered because he usually smiled, but that day he looked calm, too calm. The librarian remembered him asking if the poetry section had any new arrivals. He picked out a slim collection titled Homesick for Who I Was. He didn't check it out, just read for a while and placed it back. Then he was gone. No one knows exactly when he left town. The only real clue was what he mailed. The postmaster said it was a large envelope, no return address. He handed it over without comment. Inside was a manila folder labeled Missing Person File, Leonard Grady, self-filed. The report was filled out in his handwriting, clinical, precise. Under Person Last Seen, he'd written, in a bookstore with an orange door asking the wrong questions. Under Distinguishing Features, he wrote, carries silence like a briefcase, frowns at his own name. Under Additional Notes, just one line. If found, tell him I forgive him. That envelope was addressed to the police department, but somehow it never made it there. Instead, it was found weeks later in the lost mail bin in a post office 2 counties over. No record of how it got rerouted, no tracking code. Just sitting there, waiting. Like he wanted it to be found, just not too soon. Back in his apartment, everything was in order. Bed made, dishes done, journal from the Orange Door bookstore placed neatly on the table, open to the final page. The hardest part isn't remembering. It's deciding which version of you to carry forward. I've met them all now. The compliant son, the self-erased writer, the man who answered to Cal, the man who apologized for taking up space, the man who tried to be smaller, quieter, less. I loved them. I really did. But I'm not bringing them with me. L. He left behind very little. A bag of clothes at a shelter, a stack of poetry books at the local library with sticky notes. This one helped me stay alive. Read page 42. Not for everyone, but maybe for you. And in a mailbox outside a quiet retirement home, a single letter. Dear Eleanor, if you ever wondered, yes, I remember the diner. I remember the song. I remember saying, I'll call you when I find the right name. I'm still looking. Yours, question mark, question mark, question mark. A month later, a new tenant moved into Leonard's apartment, found a photo taped inside a cupboard door. It showed a man on a train platform, no luggage, looking up. Someone had written in red ink, not leaving, just stepping towards something unnamed. The new tenant left it there. Didn't need to take it down. Didn't need to. rumors began. A man fitting Leonard's description was spotted in Montana, painting murals on the side of barns. In Oregon, a bookseller claimed a stranger came in and donated 300 pages of handwritten notes titled Instructions for Becoming Real. In a diner in Flagstaff, a waitress swore a man called Cal sat at the corner booth every Sunday, never ordered, just read poetry and tipped well. But none of them could confirm. He never stayed long, never left a name, just the faint scent of cedar, and once a postcard. I am not where I was, but I'm not gone. Sometimes you have to vanish to find enough silence to become. Some say Leonard never existed, that he was a story someone invented to cope with forgetting. Others think he's still out there, quietly rebuilding a version of himself that finally fits. And maybe they're both right, because truth isn't always what happened. Sometimes it's what we choose to believe happened. Somewhere in a bookstore with an orange door, there's an empty chair in the back, waiting. Not for Leonard, but for the next person who walks in feeling incomplete. And maybe, just maybe, a journal will be waiting there too, labeled, "For the version of you that got left behind. Come get them." Leonard didn't come back. Not officially. No forwarding address, no signature on file, no rental agreement or online login. But sometimes healing doesn't look like return. Sometimes it's the quiet reorganization of ghosts. June, the archivist at the public library, was the first to notice something strange. In the poetry section, between G and H, someone had slipped in an unlabeled folder. Inside, photocopied pages, journals, poems, sketches, all unsigned. Some were typed, others handwritten, some angry, some soft like breath on glass. One had the title, Version 3.6, More Silence, Less Shame. Another simply said, "For the boy who never liked the name Leonard, but didn't know why." June sat there reading, forgetting to shelve the returns. At the bottom of the folder was a sticky note. Archives are for what we don't want to forget, even if we never said them out loud. L.C. ? She didn't file the folder in the system. She didn't return it to Lost and Found. She placed it on the staff shelf labeled Local Authors and whispered, "Welcome home." Elsewhere, in a coffee shop in the next city, the barista who once served Leonard every Thursday began noticing something. Every Thursday at 9:07 a.m., someone left a single napkin on the window counter, folded. Inside, a poem. Never signed, never the same style. Some about rain, some about becoming real, some simply about a man eating toast, thinking of the name Cal and how it tasted like freedom. They became known as the napkin poems. People started collecting them. No one knew where they came from, but they kept arriving. A woman named Eleanor, yes, that Eleanor, received a package one day. No return address. Inside, a music CD burned with the words, "For the Diner and the Silence." Track 3, "The Song We Never Got to Dance To." Track 7, "Cal Talking to No One." Track 10, "If You See Her Again, Tell Her She Was Enough." She didn't cry. She just sat at the kitchen table, hand resting on the CD player, and whispered, "Took you long enough," then hit play. People think healing is loud, a breakthrough, a confession, a redemption arc with music swelling. But Leonard's healing was made of paper and time and things left behind on purpose. He didn't return to who he was. He just stopped running from the fragments and instead filed them like a librarian of selves. In an abandoned post office outside town, someone found a wooden crate. Inside, a photo labeled 2006, before the quiet started, a torn shirt with the name tag Leo barely visible, a paperback book titled Disappearing Gracefully with notes in the margins, too romantic, real disappearing is slower, and a journal, leather-bound from a bookstore with an orange door. Inside, the last written page. Today, I didn't try to forget. That's progress. I don't know who I'll be tomorrow, but today I allowed myself to feel this version without apology. That's enough. In the months that followed, more fragments appeared, taped inside library books, left on park benches, scrawled on cafe receipts, like breadcrumbs, not to return, but to let the world know I was here, I mattered, even if only to myself. Then one spring day, June received a package at the library. Inside, an index card box, hand-labeled, The Archive of Lost Selves. Each card had a name. Leonard, version 1.0, too obedient. Leonard, version 2.3, forgot what he loved. Cal, version 3.0, walked without direction. Question mark, question mark, question mark, version 4.7, wrote napkin poems. And blank, version 5.1, healing begins. At the back, this one, version infinity, ongoing. June wept. Not for Leonard, but for the fact that someone, somewhere, had begun to forgive their own shadow. That was rare and beautiful and so much harder than disappearing. Healing doesn't mean erasing the parts of you that broke. It means making space for them on the shelf, tagging them, labeling the fragile boxes, and saying, "You were me once. You don't have to drive anymore. But you deserve a name. You deserve rest." In time, the community made a small corner in the library for the archive. It wasn't big or official, but visitors left notes. I found my own version 2.3 here. Reading this helped me forgive who I was at 19. I think I'm still version 4.4, and that's okay. Thank you, whoever you are. No one knew who created it. No one needed to. Because healing, like disappearing, works best in the soft spaces no one sees. Somewhere, Leonard may still be walking. Maybe he goes by another name now. Maybe he doesn't use names anymore. But every time someone forgives a version of themselves, he comes back a little bit. Not as a man, but as a permission. Years later, the story still circulates of the man who filed a missing person report for himself, of Leonard Grady, or Cal, or someone who chose neither. Sometimes people ask, was it real? The missing years, the motel room, the journals and napkin poems, and most hauntingly, the version of him that may still be walking somewhere without a name. In an ethics class at a small liberal arts college, the story is taught as a case study. What makes a person? The professor writes the name Leonard Grady on the board, then crosses it out, then writes unknown. She asks, if someone remembers everything but no longer responds to the name they were given, are they still themselves? A student replies, maybe they're finally themselves. In an AA meeting in Des Moines, someone stands to share, says, I read about this guy once, filed a missing person report for himself, said he wanted someone to come find him, but maybe he just wanted permission to begin again. Another person nods, then whispers, sometimes I want to vanish too. But no one laughs, because everyone in the room already has, in some way, somewhere. In a children's book section, a slim story appears one day, uncredited. It's about a boy named Leo who walks into a forest to find his shadow, but finds a mirror instead. At the end of the book, there's a line. He didn't come back with answers, just the courage to stop hiding. The barcode never scans. The system says, not found, but the librarians leave it on the shelf anyway. There's a mural on the side of a building in a small Arizona town. No one knows who painted it. It's simple. A man with his back turned, looking toward an endless horizon. Below him, a phrase. Sometimes the self you lost is just ahead. Walk softer. Back in the post office where it all began, the old clerk is long gone, but tucked in the bottom drawer of the file cabinet, past the bills and rubber bands, is a folder. Yellowed, untouched. It reads, Missing Person Report, Leonard Grady, filed by self. Status, unresolved. Note, he was last seen becoming. Signature, blank. Someone, someday, will find it. They'll wonder if it was a mistake, a prank, a metaphor. They might even laugh, until they notice something strange, their own name written faintly on the back. Because maybe we all go missing, at least once. Maybe not from the world, but from ourselves. And maybe, just maybe, the real miracle isn't being found, it's daring to file the report in the first place.